up and ready to go for week 2 of Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. I'm Nate Rohr. I'm feeling a whole lot better. Maren Angus Combs, you're feeling great too, huh?
I'm feeling great. I felt so bad for you last week. It was like, let's make our podcast debut, and you were feeling bad.
Yeah, I mean, hey, tournament season is a grind for northern programs, and of course, Nebraska resides in the north. So obviously, you ride along with it, and I think all the flying and the weird start times and all the travel, I think it finally caught up to me last week. I am happy to report I am feeling better and ready to talk some softball and ready to not repulse you, the viewer at home. So really just the entire experience in place this week. Speaking of which, entire experience, we were speaking with Howard's head softball coach Tori Tyson, former Husker, gone on to great success as the head coach of the Bison, led them to the NCAA tournament last year after a distinguished assistant coaching career. She's also taken a head coaching job in the professional ranks. So excited to talk with Tori and speak about her journey and check in on the Bison and everything else. And then we'll also chat with Huskers shortstop Billie Andrews, and she's having another terrific year leading the Nebraska offense, the Gretna native, hitting well over 350 with power, also a force in the middle of the Nebraska defense. So excited to chat with her and see where she is. And then, of course, we will end with so much power, the Big Ten power rankings at the end of the program. But Maren, of course, this program starts with a look at the Nebraska softball program. The Huskers go down to Wichita last weekend, finish up 2-2. They beat Missouri State twice. And, maybe going into the weekend, I underestimated Missouri State. I frankly kind of forgot that they were a regional team last year. They were the Missouri Valley Conference tournament champion. They finished second in that league. And lest I take them lightly the rest of the weekend, they end up upsetting Wichita State. So 2 nice wins for Nebraska on that respect. But I think what catches my eye, the 2 losses to Wichita State. Certainly Wichita is a great team. They're a team that right now I think you would favor to win the American Athletic Conference, certainly get into regionals. But those 2 games were great opportunities for Nebraska softball to kind of distinguish themselves from Wichita State when it comes to Selection Sunday. And we saw a Selection Sunday on the basketball side this last weekend. But when Selection Sunday comes for softball, unfortunately, I think these 2 losses are going to hurt Nebraska.
I would agree with that. I would use the word disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
That the first game, I know I sat down to watch it and I was really excited, but the pitching in both of those Wichita State games was just all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
There was no control in either of those games, and it's hard to beat a team when you spot them a lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially that first game, Sarah Harness walks 6 in an inning in the third. And it's a Wichita State team that really doesn't need any help. You're talking about Sydney McKinney and Addison Barnard, who are 2 of the top offensive players in all of college softball, forget mid-major, conference, whatever. They're 2 of the best hitters in all of college softball. Oh, yeah. And there are nice contributing parts after those 2. So the last thing in the world you need to be doing is giving them free passes. And yet, in an inning and a third, Sarah Harness walks 6. Courtney Wallace, in her start against Wichita State, walks 5. Kendall Mangle was kind of a revelation to me in terms of how she held the fort. She wasn't spotless. That's a great Wichita State lineup. She was able to hold them, somewhat in check. But the fact of the matter is that Wichita State is not a team you can give anything to.
No.
Let alone 14 free passes in 10 offensive innings. That's just a recipe to lose and lose big. And really Nebraska got blown out the second game, and they were in a lot of trouble in that first game. So I think it was a disappointing step back for this program, especially after the Arizona victory, that kind of resets your expectation that Nebraska can go down to Arizona and win a game. Well, Wichita is not quite as good. They're good. They're right in that sort of weight class, but you feel like Nebraska could have gotten one down there, and unfortunately they didn't.
I honestly felt like they were going to come back and win the first game.
Mm-hmm.
They were down what seemed like a mountain.
8-1,
right?
8-1 through 2 innings.
And as the game kept going along, I was like, oh, okay. I think they may come back and tie this thing up, which they had the opportunity to.
Yes.
But it ends on a line drive, a double up on first base, and it that kind of takes the wind out of the sails. It ends the rally, and that kind of, to me, set the tone for the weekend, because I felt like, while yes, they beat Missouri State in the next game, they come out against Wichita in the second matchup, and it wasn't even close.
Right. Yeah, it was another blowout.
Yeah.
And this time they didn't fight their way back into it. But, talking about that first game, I mean, Nebraska, as we said, down 8-1. They put up a 4 spot in the third to get back into it. They trade runs in the 4th and 5th innings, and Wichita puts up a run in the 6th to take a 10-6 lead to the 7th. Nebraska gets a 2-run home run from Talia Tokheim, who's been a real revelation in this lineup, as she has plugged in from day one and hit a lot. And I think that's pretty rare for a freshman to do. And then Nebraska gets 2 on with 1 out ahead of Caitlin Neal. And I'm telling you, that ball was a rocket. Caitlin couldn't have hit it much harder. No. It was just right at the second baseman. And unfortunately, it triggered a game-ending double play. And you feel, and you're right, it did set the tone. It was kind of like, okay, momentum was moving in Nebraska's direction, and all of a sudden, Neal lines into that double play, ending that rally. And then game 2 was pretty similar, at least at the start, to game 1, in that Wichita was able to build up a big lead. And this time Nebraska just didn't come back. And so it's really the first disappointing weekend writ large for Nebraska softball. And hey, tournament season is taxing. I mean, gosh, look at me last weekend. but here's the thing. You're going to have ups and downs. And Nebraska's pitching staff for the first 3 weeks of this year carried this team. But, the pitching has struggled the last week and a half. And if this team is going to get done what it seeks to get done, it's going to have to improve, and it starts with throwing strikes, and particularly in the case of Sarah Harness.
Absolutely. And that's also something we talked with Coach Revelle about last week, was that, losing KK.
Kaylin Kenny. Yep.
Hurts.
Oh, sure it does.
And it proved that proved to be detrimental this weekend, because Harness obviously didn't have the control. Wallace struggled in her innings, and then you bring in Kendall, and we saw her once before her game this weekend. We saw her pitch against Oklahoma State, and that lineup does its thing and crushed her. But she did a decent job this weekend. However, can 3 pitchers get you through?
I think it's going to be a big challenge. Part of what complicated Wichita State game 1 was the idea that, okay, Sarah Harness has been ineffective today. If you have Kaylin Kinney, you can say, okay, Kaylin, you go out there and keep us in this game, and hopefully we can come back for you. Or you can throw Courtney Wallace there. So either way, you're in a position to where you've got some options. Nebraska had no option when Sarah Harness was ineffective on Friday night. They wanted to save Courtney Wallace for the game on Saturday. They didn't want to give Wichita State a look at her in a game that they trailed by 7. So the only decision was to go with Kendall Mengel. And so I think Kaylin Kinney, her status, her availability is going to be very important in the coming weeks. Of course, this week, it's the final weekend of invitational season. It's non-conference. It's not necessarily as imperative that they have her this week, but at the same time, as you look ahead to conference play, I think it's pretty important that Kaylin Kinney comes back for this team. And of course, after an injury like that, you worry, how effective is she going to be when she gets back?
Yeah, but thank goodness it's her glove hand.
Right.
So thank goodness for that, because if it was her pitching hand, that would be a question that nobody would really have an answer to. But like you said, last week of invitational play, we're looking ahead, right? Fairfield, Kansas City, Kansas, Tulsa.
Right.
Okay.
That's a weekend that Nebraska should go 5-0.
It should be.
You know, and no disrespect to any of the teams that Nebraska's playing, but let's be very honest and say that the expectation is that Nebraska wins all 5, and especially moving into Big Ten play, if you're going to be the team that you expected to be, that's a weekend where you need to show up and take care of business. And especially after losing both to Wichita State, it was going to be unrealistic for Nebraska to go undefeated last weekend.
Yeah.
You sure would have taken it. You would have been over the moon, happy if they did it. But at the same time, Nebraska needed to get one against Wichita State. And they were not able to do it. So that just reduces your margin for error for the rest of the season, to build up a resume first to get to regionals. And let's be clear, I don't think this team has done anything to take themselves out of that running.
No.
But you want to have margin for error. You want to be watching that selection show on Sunday with expectation instead of nervousness. Of course, last year Nebraska took care of that by winning the Big Ten tournament. But even if they hadn't, even if they lose to Michigan, I think they're watching the selection show last year with the expectation of getting in. And that's how you want to be. So in order to do that, you need to stack a lot of chips, especially this time of year with the Big Ten looking a little down, looking a little back from where they were last year. It's important to solidify your resume right now, which means going down to Lawrence, weather permitting, and that's a question. Going down to Lawrence and taking care of all 5 of those games.
Yeah, and right now the conference only has one truly ranked team in the top 25, and that's Maryland. And ironically,
our first guest is very,
very
close to Maryland, and our first guest is Tori Tyson, the head coach of the Howard Bison, of course, coaching out near the D.C. area, and a former Husker pitcher and former Husker captain. And after her career as a Cornhusker has gone on to great accomplishment, first as an assistant coach, Maryland, Cal State Fullerton, among others. And now, as the head coach of the Howard Bison, we are pleased to be joined by Tori Tyson. Tori, welcome in. Glad to have you along with us.
Hi. Oh my God. I love you both. Thank you for having me.
Hey, great to have you along with us. Of course, last year, you guys make the NCAA regionals as the champions of your conference. What did that mean to the development of your program and the trajectory of what you're trying to build at Howard in terms of a cornerstone, of a milestone in that building process?
It was everything, like I speak about like my vision for the program very early. And as I recruited these kids, and I mean, half the time, let's be honest, as coaches, when we do that, we really have no idea how it's going to pan out. So you're just selling this dream and like making people feel you're really convinced of it. But it was right on our timeline. I thought that we had just the perfect mix of the freshman class I inherited with these like spicy freshmen that I brought in. And they were very spicy, and it was like the perfect storm. And everybody that stayed a part of the program from the beginning got to see it all kind of come together, just as I had written up, minus the COVID year and us having to take a break. It was everything. And last year was my first full year with Howard. So it also just kind of spoke to that and how special that was.
Your first full year, and you go and you win your conference championship, and playing in the tournament, being put on that national stage, and then the beginning of this year, your schedule has been insane. And like I want to emphasize insane because there's no other way to describe it.
um, it absolutely has been insane. I'm feeling all pieces of that insanity. We are at any given point, 8 or 9 out of our 10 starters are freshmen or sophomores.
Mm.
This sophomore class is a special group, extremely talented. And when we left regionals, we wanted more. It took us about 7 innings to get comfortable on that stage. We were in a position where our program did not travel post COVID. We could not fly. So we didn't really get to play these teams that challenged our speed of play. And when we left, we challenged Mississippi State, and we really left like, man, we gave them, I think, 6 unearned in the first 2 innings. We ended up losing 6-3 and battled. We out hit them, and like we left like, man, we want to be back on the stage. And when we come, we want to shock the world and we want to win one of these games. We want to win a game at the regionals. I don't want to go in there as the 4 seed and everybody expecting us to be run ruled. We're going to be the 4 seed, but I want to cause ruckus while we are there. I want people to have to throw their number one and bring them in. And all of us did. And so when I made the schedule, your culture's got to be in a position where you know that they can lose without turning on each other, without the culture just completely shaking. And this is the first year I feel like we have that because all of them are welcoming that challenge. And that we understand that right now, the only thing that's bruised is our ego. But I am a coach that is into growth and development. And so we go get dubbed by Tennessee opening day, only to go play UCLA and lose 4-0 and challenge them till our very last out. And I think that that's the testament to these freshmen and sophomores that I'm speaking of and the trajectory of our program. And we've had 3 winning records the last couple years, and that was great. And we needed it. But we are there. We want to win that is like going to turn that corner, like one of those big wins that now every time we're playing these Power Fives, we know because we have proven that we belong there.
Chatting with Howard head softball coach and former Husker Tori Tyson. And you mentioned starting off with Tennessee, and then you play UCLA later on in the year. And of course, you're a native of Southern California. Your club program, the Corona Angels program that your father has coached in and that you've been so tightly connected to, has sent a lot of players to that UCLA program. What did it mean for you to take a program onto the field at Easton Stadium, first off, just playing, just being out there, and then second off, giving them a battle?
Yeah. To lead my HBCU into Easton Stadium is like a moment that I will never forget. I was like a proud mom, like taking pictures from the vans, and like we had so many Howard fans in the line already, and recorded them. And I'm like holding my phone, watching the girls walk in because the gravity of that moment. I grew up going to that stadium as a kid, waiting for Lisa's autograph, waiting for Natasha's autograph. Heck, I was waiting for Angelica Sheldon. I have watched that program and just been a fan. The home that Sue built, and I am here walking my athletes in. It was unreal. And I'm a team full of minority athletes. And so for them Natasha's all of our hero, right? Like Natasha was the representation that we had coming up. And so to walk and lead them in there, and UCLA was just phenomenal. They let us do our BP on the field, and our girls just felt like rock stars. And, I got emotional in the thing because I'm not into like downplaying stuff. So I'm like, you guys know this is a big deal. We are like the first HBCU that they have scheduled. This is a big deal. And I want us to embrace it and live in it and be where our feet are. But then when we start the game, we have a bigger duty to rep for some of the West Coast people. They've never seen HBCU teams play, right? Like Bethune-Cookman is the only one that regularly goes out there, and Laura does a great job of that. So we also had a duty to show that what HBCU softball is, and our spirit and our energy and our culture, but that we can play. And I was so proud of them because they represented that so well. Mia threw amazing. It was just great to watch. And after the game, the UCLA ops had autograph session. and called a security guard over to like watch over our girls. So they just felt like rock stars, and they don't get this every day. Again, just a moment that made me cry. Like once I came down from the high of all of it, just that whole experience, it was amazing.
You've had kind of a incredible education as far as a coach. And of course, we mentioned your father and the importance of his work as a club ball coach in Southern California. Of course, Rhonda Revelle, Lori Sipple, Diane Miller being around them here in Lincoln. What did Coach Revelle and her staff teach you during your time in Lincoln that you've carried on now during your time with Howard?
Oh my goodness. Coach Revelle loved me when it hurt. I mean, and all of them, right? I was a pain in the butt, and I will admit that. And it's easy to love your best player, the one that's putting up all the stats. It's harder to love that kid that you see potential in. And they keep proving you wrong, for so many years. And she did that. And so just loving on people for who they are and who you would like them to become. Is something that Coach Revelle did. She does not have to have this rapport with me. I did not do enough in that program for her to have like fought as hard as she did to see me through, but she did, and that's who they are as women and as leaders. And now as a coach, she is just, all of them. Sound advice. Coach Miller knows we're so understaffed here. So she's gone as far as putting together hitting plans for me. Like if I felt overwhelmed, like Coach Sipple will answer your call and give you a pitching webinar on demand. And all of them, it's to have such an open door policy at your alma mater. I understand that that's not the normal for everybody. And so I am so grateful. And Coach Revelle, there was a moment, and Nate, you remember this, when we went to regionals at Washington. And I watched her stand on something. She refused to make us play at like 1 a.m. They were wanting us to play. And she told me, Heidi Folan, and Julie to like slide through the
on the tarp. Yeah.
In the rain. And there's these pictures of us drenched. And I'm over here having a slip and slide party, but it was so much bigger, right? Like she was
making a point.
Yes. And I mean, now I'm not going to say, listen, I'm not going to blame her for me ferociously fighting everything wrong. But I mean, to be empowered like that at that age, it was everything. And I totally made the right choice in calling Lincoln, Nebraska home.
Well, we were happy to have you here, and certainly we track your progress with great pride. Hey, Tori, thanks so much for joining us here today. Best of luck to Howard in the coming weeks, and hopefully we see you on one of those 64 lines headed to regionals again this year. Good luck to you, Tori.
Let's hope. Thank you, guys.
You betcha. Former Husker and current head coach of the Howard Bison, Tori Tyson, and of course, exciting to see her coaching career blossom to where she has taken a team to regionals.
And she's become such an inspiration for so many student athletes that's of any age, right? You look at her social media and almost everything blows up, but she's just become one of the biggest voices in our game. And I text her all the time. I'm like, I'm so freaking proud of you. Like, she is a one of a kind human. And so when you get the good human plus the good coach, it's a recipe for success.
And we certainly track her progress with great pride back here in Nebraska. And we go from a former Husker to a current Husker. Nebraska shortstop Billie Andrews joining us here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. Billie, of course, the junior shortstop from Gretna, Nebraska. And Billie, first off, halfway through the season, how you feeling? How much energy is still in the tank for you as you come through this tough part of the schedule?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about our season. We've had some tough games that we've played, and I think that we've put up a good fight in a lot of those games. And I think that our team still has a lot of potential in what we can give. And I think we're just waiting to prove that to everyone. I think the best part of the season is coming up, and we're going to go out there and we're going to do something. We're going to do something crazy.
Your computer's fired up too. Hey, but no,
I like looked at mine like, oh no, what happened?
Panic for everybody. So good to hear your Macintosh is working. Difficult conditions down at Wichita State. The mist might have sidelined my Mac laptop, but that's neither here nor there. It's been a tough schedule for this team. You guys have played, I believe, 8 games against ranked opposition. It's been a step up in terms of competition here in the tournament season. What do you think you've learned in playing so many great teams, including a bunch in the top 10?
I think that what we've learned as a team is that we can go out there and compete, and we can go out there and beat good teams. I think in the past couple seasons, like, we haven't had this type of competition, so we didn't really know our potential going into like postseason. And I think that playing these good teams really shows us that like we are as good as them, and like we can go out there and we can beat good teams like that.
The Arizona win in particular, you guys were able to go down to Hillenbrand Stadium and knock off the Wildcats. And of course, when you're talking college softball, Arizona softball stands out as one of the flagship programs in the country. And you were able to go into their home stadium. They're coming off a College World Series appearance. The stadium was full, surprisingly, with a number of Nebraska fans along with Arizona fans. What did that win mean to you?
I think that meant a lot for our team. We knew going in that they had a big stadium and they had a lot of fans coming. I think before the game started, we were like, oh, we think this game is sold out. And so we were all like really excited to go in there and do what we can do. And it was just really, it was a good feeling after the game. And like during the game, like we were going there and we were hitting a lot and we were scoring a lot of runs, and our pitching and our defense was holding it down. And I think that just is a boost into the next part of the season, right? Like we have that confidence and we have the feel good. And I think that's just something that we can take into the next games that we have, and we can just move along with that and just like hold it in our back pocket, but like also embrace that like we did something really special when we went there and played them.
This season, every season has its ebbs and flows, right? Your peaks and valleys, all the cliches, right? So how do you deal with coming off a high like Arizona, the Arizona weekend, and then going into Wichita and having those 2 games against the Shockers? Just how do you guys rebound from that?
I think we just learn from those games and keep moving forward. There was a lot of things that happened in those games that we could have controlled and we could have done better with. So I think just learning from that and then moving forward, we know that we're a good team and those 2 games aren't going to hold us back. So I think just taking those games as a lesson and just moving forward with what we've learned from those games.
Chatting with Nebraska shortstop Billie Andrews. Of course, Billie, you had a good freshman year for Nebraska, ended up being a really great debut year. And then last year, you started tournament season red hot, had difficulty maintaining it through the Big Ten schedule. And of course, it's difficult to keep hitting at the clip at which you were hitting the first 2 months of last year. This year, you've gotten off to another solid start. What adjustments are you going to make to be able to continue to produce at a solid level to where, conference season, you're able to continue to help this team out on the offensive side of your game?
I think just really studying like my film as well as the film of the pitchers that we're facing, and just really focusing on what the pitcher's giving me and what I can attack as a hitter, and kind of just taking it game by game and focusing on what I can do in that game, that at bat, that pitch, like what I can control and what I can do to produce for the team. I think last year I got in a slump, and I think that kind of, I got kind of stressed about that. But I think this year I really just want to focus on taking it just game by game, pitch by pitch.
They always say slumps are like a warm bed, easy to get into, hard to get out of, and certainly a tough experience for you. you're playing with your sister, Brooke. And of course, Brooke came into the Husker program a year before you did. What lessons were you able to take from her earlier experiences? And what does it mean to you to go through your college career playing with your sister?
Yeah, so like when I came in, she kind of told me that it's not like high school, like it's not like club ball. It's a higher level of softball. And there's going to be a lot more like ups and downs going through it. So I think that kind of prepared me mentally for what it was going to be like. I think that's probably the biggest piece of like information that she gave me coming in, and like playing with her is just something special. I've played with her my whole life, and like we just have that kind of bond where like we can just play together and live together and just like kind of do everything together. And it's just really nice because we've grown up together, we know each other. It's easy for us, and just playing with her for the last couple of years is something special that I'm going to hold on to forever. She's my sister, and like right now we're playing side by side, and that's something that nothing better that I could ask for. I love playing next to her. I love playing with her. I feel very special that I get to play college ball with her.
You actually kind of went towards the question I was going to ask you next, because you mentioned playing side by side. So, is there like a sister telepathy thing that you guys have where you don't really have to talk to each other? You just know like where the other's going to be at a certain time?
Yes, and I think people make fun of us because of it, because like at practice we're like making plays and people are like, how did you do that? And it's like we just know. Like I know what she's gonna do, she knows what I'm gonna do. It's easy to work with, and I think in a way we have some type of connection.
Hey, that connection has to help, as this infield, which we thought would look very similar to last year's, has taken on a different look. Sydney Gray has been out the last couple of weeks with a hand injury. You have a new second baseman next to you in Caitlin Canada. How much has that connection really helped smooth things over to where injuries and absences and graduations that might have really changed the dynamic of that infield really haven't?
I think just as a team as a whole, we all have connections. So like when Sid was at third, like me and Sid work really well together, and we kind of like just through a lot of communication and helping out Kate. Like Kate kind of came in pretty smoothly. She came in with a lot of like confidence and excitement at second base, so that kind of helped with her transition in. And I think we all just connect really nicely and easily together, and we work really well together. So I think the transition from last year to this year has been not easy, but like easier than we had expected it. But I think that we all, like as a whole, like as a team, we all work really well together, and like any transition that we need to go through, I think that we can handle it, and we can do it with ease.
Finally, Billie, we'll get you out on this. Of course, as we mentioned, we're the home stretch of tournament season, the final non-conference invitational of the year coming up in Lawrence. Last year, you guys went through tournament season reasonably successfully, but didn't really stand out. It was conference play where you guys were able to make a real turn and turn the corner. What were you able to do last year to step up your level of play against presumably a tougher part of your schedule? And is that something you'll be able to replicate this year?
Yeah. I think the key for us was we leaned into each other. Like we leaned on our teammates, we leaned on our coaches, and we kind of just did it for each other. We didn't do it for anyone else. It was just us as a team going out there and having fun and just focusing on what we can control in the game and what we can do, and just going out there and just having fun for one another and trying to perform for your teammate and try to get this hit for your teammate or get this strikeout for your teammate or like make this play for your pitcher. And I think that's the focus that kind of helped us with our success last year and what we need again this year. And I think we have that. Just keep continuing that team first mentality type thing that we talk about all the time, and just continuing that when we go into Big Ten season.
Well, Billy, certainly a lot of success in the books last year and even through the first half of this season, and hoping that again carries through to a successful run through the Big Ten Conference. Billy, thanks so much for making some time for us this morning. Good luck to you this weekend and the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Huskers shortstop Billie Andrews, of course, critical to Nebraska's success, and a big part of her game, her aggressiveness, especially at the plate. 4 leadoff home runs this year, a really big spark to this Nebraska offense.
Yeah, she is a different type of leadoff hitter. And that's something that Coach Ravella talked about in her preseason press conference, was just how many tools Billie has. And one of those that sets her apart is her power game, right? She has 9 home runs so far this season. She leads the conference. She's top 5 in the NCAA. That's just a different type of hitter, because normally when you get your leadoff hitter, you're thinking speed and small ball. And she's the opposite. She can do it, right? She's got some decent speed.
I would push back against opposite, because yes, she does have the speed aspect. She can bunt. She can get a leadoff single. We've not seen it yet in the season, but she's a good base stealer. She's not displayed that part of the game due to a hamstring injury, though I expect we will see that more as it comes along. So she has all the speed aspects that your normal leadoff hitter has, but as you mentioned, she also brings to the table the power aspect of the game, to where if a pitcher is thinking, well, I'm just not going to walk her. I have to come after her, so I'm not starting this inning in a hole. She can hit the thing over the fence and you're down 1-0, and that's a really big hole. So she's just a versatile offensive force for this team.
Right. And as I'm looking at her stats just to have them in front of me, 20 RBIs as a leadoff hitter with 20 RBIs. That's A, great for her. She's doing her job, but B, that's kudos to the bottom half of the lineup.
Yeah.
Because they're getting on base for her to drive in, which is why Coach Ravella has her in that spot. She's able to drive in runs when she needs to, and she's able to get things going.
And the bottom of the order, the production bottom half of the order has been a little hit or miss this year. And that just naturally, some of that naturally comes with the territory. I mean, you're not going to put your better hitters down there. But, I mean, Caitlin Caneda, for a bottom half of the order type hitter, has had a terrific year. Talia Tokheim's really asserted herself as somebody who is going to be about as dangerous a 6-hitter, 7-hitter, 8-hitter as you're going to find. And you still hope that Abby Squire can turn things around at the plate. I mean, she's put that sort of year on the books. She's not done it yet this year. But she's somebody that I think could turn it around, especially in Big Ten play. And so that's setting the table for Billie to have all those opportunities.
Right. And Tokheim, oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh my goodness. She started 7 games. She's played in 10. She's got 4 home runs and 12 RBIs.
Oof. Yeah, that's the exceptional part. The fact that somebody can come in as a freshman and be somebody that looks like a line drive hitter. She's not that person that's just big and imposing up there. She looks like a line drive hitter, and yet she's not just hitting, she's hitting for power right out of the box for Nebraska. And so, between Tokheim and Caitlin Caneda, my worry coming into this year was that this big freshman class would not have opportunities to contribute. And silly me, I mean, Caneda plugged into the lineup right away. And with the injury to Sydney Gray, moving Brooke Andrews into the infield, opening up the outfield spot, Talia Tokheim's plugged into the lineup, and the last 3 weeks has been about as good a hitter as Nebraska has had, and has really put herself in a spot where she needs at-bats as the year goes on.
Yeah, and that's something as a coach you have to be happy with, because you want to be able to give your players opportunity, and you want them to prove themselves when they're given these opportunities. And unfortunately, when you have someone go down hurt, if someone's performing at this peak level, they're going to keep riding the hot hand.
Right. And it will bring up a problem when a happy problem, mind you, when Sydney Gray is healthy. And I think this Husker program and coaching staff expects that Gray will be healthy soon to where she can return to the Husker lineup, whether it's this weekend in Lawrence or even the first weekend of conference play. But it brings up the happy problem of how do we get everybody at bats that we need to. And so when Gray returns, that's just an extra bat, and it continues to ask the entire lineup to be focused and locked in. That's sort of that competition aspect that brings out your best performance and make sure that you're totally locked in. All right, so we are down to the last week of non-conference play in the Big Ten. It's time to plug it in, the Big Ten Power Rankings. And Maren, I'll let you go first with the top part of your rankings as we prepare for the final pace lap before Big Ten play. What do you see at the top of the conference?
Well, after last weekend.
Yes.
Because what we saw, well, we talked about it on our episode, but I moved around those top three, right? I moved them around to where it was Nebraska, Maryland, Northwestern. And I gave Nebraska all the respect that they deserved. However, they let me down.
Okay.
They let me down this week. So Maryland had a great weekend.
They did.
Maryland is going to move right back into that number one spot. And, Minnesota had a good weekend.
They had a really good weekend at the Viking ship in downtown Minneapolis.
Isn't that so cool?
That was cool. And I'll tell you, I hope Nebraska plays in that tournament down the road because, it's one thing to play in the Unidome. It's unique, but it's a little odd. But the idea of playing in an NFL stadium, and especially in downtown Minneapolis, I mean, due respect to Cedar Falls, but downtown Minneapolis is a little better than the fringe of Cedar Falls, Iowa. But that location, that stadium, I think it'd be a lot of fun for Nebraska to go up there. So I'm hopeful the Huskers play up there. But yeah, a good weekend for Minnesota. So your top three, you've got Maryland back at 1.
Maryland back at 1. And I'm gonna move Nebraska to 2. I'm gonna keep them there, and then I'm gonna keep Northwestern at 3 and Minnesota at 4.
Okay. My top 4, top 2 stay the same. Northwestern had the week off.
Yeah.
So they've only played 16 games, and I mean Nebraska's played 24, Maryland's played 23, Illinois has played 23. It's a little interesting to me how they go about scheduling. I'm going to keep Northwestern at number 1.
You are high on these Wildcats.
I'm high on them, and it's just my preseason prejudices.
Okay.
And the expectation of what they're going to do in the Big Ten. I mean, let's be clear that, we've talked quite a bit about Maryland, and they're in your top spot. I feel like they've done the most. Of anybody in the Big Ten. And when you do a power rankings like this, it's a discussion of who has done the most versus who do you think is the best. And those are occasionally mutually exclusive, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so at this time, I think Northwestern is still the best team. But I've got Maryland lurking there at number 2. With the idea that they've been pretty accomplished to this point in the year. They've got a lot of talent. They've done a nice job of rebuilding that program. And Northwestern, maybe I'm giving them some benefit just from the fact that they didn't play and they didn't screw up last weekend. That's kind of a harsh way of putting it, but they did nothing for me to drop them from that top spot.
Okay.
So I'll keep them at 1. But I've got the finger floating over the dump button on them if they falter over the next few weeks. Maryland 2. I'm going to bump Illinois up to 3.
Okay.
They're kind of that balance of plenty of talent, and they've done quite a bit. Regional team last year. I feel like they deserve a little bump. They were 4-1 last weekend. And then I'll slot the Huskers at 4th. Like I said, I was a little disappointed that they weren't able to get a game at Wichita. understand there's there's a pretty little gap between 3 and 4. That can change in a hurry depending on the results this weekend or the first of conference play. Huskers, though, at 4 right now for me.
Okay.
All right. So we've got kind of the top part. Go take it from there.
All right. So now we're looking, where are we? 5, 6, 7?
Yes.
Okay. 5, 6, 7. So this last week it looked more Minnesota, Rutgers, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's move Wisconsin right up in there
Yeah.
because their weekend in Austin, that was not easy. Texas
Mm-hmm.
State, Texas, and Alabama.
They had the toughest schedule this weekend of anybody in the Big Ten.
100%.
Yep.
The toughest schedule. They go in there, they win, they go 3 and 2.
Right. They compete well with Texas and they beat Alabama. I think that Alabama win is on the short list of good wins by a Big Ten team to this point in the year. So I bumped Wisconsin a little too. I'm keeping Ohio State at 5, 3-1 week for the Bucks. Wisconsin for me goes up a spot to 6 because of that Alabama win. And maybe I'm shorting them a little bit, but I just didn't feel like there was I felt like Ohio State was good enough for me to kind of keep them right where I had them at 5. And then Penn State and Minnesota are my 7 and 8. Penn State an undefeated weekend last weekend. Yes, against kind of a weak schedule.
Yeah.
But I've been high on the Nittany Lions from the beginning of the year. Of the teams that didn't make regionals last year, they and not Maryland were kind of my pick. And you can dock me all the points you want for not buying into Maryland a little sooner. But I really like Penn State's pitching staff, and I think they've got enough in that lineup to where they can play themselves into a regional. So in my power rankings, I bumped them a spot to 7, and then Minnesota at 8. And I think you're exactly right in that they had a great weekend, a 5-0 weekend at the Viking ship.
Mm-hmm.
They had a crowd of, I think, 1,300 for one of those games. I think it was the Idaho State game on Saturday. And there aren't many places in the country, good weather, bad weather, inside, outside, that you're drawing over 1,000 people for a non-conference game. So kudos to the folks in Minnesota, and the Gophers took care of business. And so there's reason to believe that Minnesota is in that upper half of the Big Ten. I've got them just out of it at 8. But that's a stock that I might put some money in if Big Ten teams were stocks.
Right. And so now in this area for me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at Iowa, Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State. I'm not sold on Ohio State yet, like you are.
Okay.
I feel like I need to see a little bit more. And I think this past weekend we saw what Rutgers was really made of.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we talked last week, Rutgers hadn't played anybody up until this weekend.
Right.
And not to knock any of their competition, but this weekend they had Louisiana, Florida, and Mercer. They split with Mercer.
Yep.
They lose both games to the Raging Cajuns, and they got run ruled by Florida. And that's a Florida team that has been struggling. So
relative to who they are.
Exactly. Right. So I think that was our first glance at Rutgers and how we can see them long term.
Yeah.
And I just don't see them being a top half Big Ten team.
I would agree with that assessment. I mean, I had them 11 last week. The record looked good, but as you said, they had played an easy schedule. And let's not get on them too much for playing an easy schedule.
Yeah.
Programs can be at different places in their development, and sometimes you need to build confidence this time of year so you can be more competitive in Big Ten play. So I can totally get behind Rutgers sitting toward the bottom half of the Big Ten conference. As I look at it, I had Michigan at 9. I dropped them 3 spots, and that's probably a little unfair because they didn't play. They played one game, But also, what have they done to this point? They're 11-10.
Right?
And there are significant questions about their roster. They lost big off their pitching staff. They lost a decent amount of their lineup as well. The assumption coming into most years in Big Ten softball is, okay, how's Michigan?
Exactly.
And you start from there. But unfortunately, with the changeover in roster, with the new head coach and Carol Hutchins retiring and Bonnie Thal taking over, there's a ton of pride in that Michigan program. But are they going to be able to go out and win? I don't know. I've got them slotted 9th. I bumped Indiana up to 10. They had a good weekend against weak competition, really. 5-0. And frankly, I think they've kind of underperformed their roster, and maybe they're starting to turn a corner to where they can be a tough out in the Big Ten. Rutgers, I had 11 last week. I'll keep them there. And then Purdue at 12. They lost both their games. I think they had some weather. Shockingly, they had weather issues out in Fullerton. I know Nebraska's philosophy is go south and west, including Southern California, so that you get your games in.
Yeah, California has not been nice to any program trying to get games in so far this season. I don't know. Mother Nature said it's let there be rain. So
I mean, and they need it, but it just complicates getting softball in. So Purdue's my 12. All right, round it out.
Round it out. See, Michigan State still hanging out there at 14.
I hate to say it, but it might be a while before old Sparty climbs out of the cellar. And let's be clear, Sharonda McDonald's a good hire for them. I don't know geographically if she's the best fit, but she's somebody who has some credibility, has some ties to the South. I think she can build a little bit there. But unfortunately, that's a Michigan State program that's kind of been in disrepair for a long, long time. And that's an arduous task to turn that thing around. I've got Iowa at 13, and maybe I'm being a little harsh. Maybe it's my scarlet and cream bias.
You're being harsh. You're being very harsh.
Okay. They're 15-9. They go 3-2 last week. They've got a couple of hitters, and of course, Lecker, being a great two-way player for them, is a tough force. But I'm just not sold on them being competitive in the Big Ten. Night in and night out. Maybe 13's a little low, but I'm just not with them right now, and I don't know that they've done enough to prove that they're better than Purdue, or they're better than Rutgers, or they're better than Indiana. So I've got them 13. I think we're both in agreement about MSU.
We're in agreement about MSU, but I am high on Iowa. Maybe I'm a little too high on Iowa.
Okay.
I don't know, but
hey, then we average out perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. So, but when I look at Iowa's schedule from over the weekend, Chattanooga, always in a running for their conference title. Princeton has been to the tournament a couple of times, right? Princeton, the Ivy League starts their season later, so Princeton's played less games, but that doesn't matter.
Smart kids.
Yep. All right. Bucknell, they beat Bucknell. They lose to Lehigh. I am not upset about that loss to Lehigh because that is a Lehigh team that went into the Rhodes House first game of the year and beat Alabama.
That's true. That's a nice trophy on their mantle that I had forgotten about. I'm still not high on Iowa.
This is all right. Hawkeyes. If you're tuning into this to listen and see what we say about Iowa, here, back me up on this.
Yeah, tweet Maren. Of course, I have much love for the Iowa athletics community when Kirk Ferentz complained to the referees about me on third downs at Memorial Stadium. So not that I care.
That's why you're putting Iowa down in 13?
No, that's the freshest thing. Believe me, I've got a 20-year history with those people.
Okay.
And it ain't good.
All right.
All right. So there are our Big Ten power rankings. Discuss them, debate them, assess them. As we go into the final weekend of invitational play, and This is kind of the last pace lap. I think of it when you watch like a NASCAR race, and
Okay.
the schedules are a little easier this weekend. I think teams are trying to build up confidence and belief. You look at Nebraska's schedule this weekend: Fairfield, Kansas City, KU, Tulsa. Talking about another Husker alum in the head coaching ranks, Kiki Stokes O'Connor, the head coach of the Kansas City Roos, and it's Nebraska's first opportunity to face off with UMKC out of the Summit League, and get an assessment of where where Kiki Stokes and her program are. I think she'll be successful down there in the long term. I mean, being from Kansas City, high energy coach, somebody who knows the Kansas City softball landscape well. She's been a part of successful programs, not just as a player, but you also look at her time at South Dakota State under Krista Wood. And those programs dominated the Summit League. I think Kiki's going to be successful before long in Kansas City. I just think this year's about turning the boat around, and unfortunately it's been a little bumpy for him this year.
Yeah, and she's assembled a really good staff around her, but they're, like you said, 5-17, losses to Clemson, which maybe as expected.
Yeah.
However, there's a 7-0 loss to Creighton, which stands out to me, not because they're from Omaha, but Creighton's been down.
Creighton's been pretty up and down this year. Of course, Krista Wood, the Kiki Stokes' former head coach at South Dakota State that she worked under, and of course, Krista's now at Creighton. And we'll talk more about the Jays as this year goes on. But yeah, Creighton hasn't been beating a lot of people 7-0.
No, so just that stands out to me. They've got, but they're up and down. They split with Georgia State. They lose both to FIU. They've got. Yeah,
it's a first year head coach resume that I think, like I said, Nebraska goes into this weekend expecting to win, I think, all 5 games as long as they get played. That might be the biggest foe of the weekend, the fact that the weather is supposed to be pretty inhospitable in Lawrence Friday and Saturday. But however it goes, hopefully they get all played so that we have something to talk about next weekend here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. One way or another, we'll survey the entire college softball landscape, and especially the Huskers softball landscape and the Big Ten landscape, and chat about it as we prepare for the first weekend of Big Ten play. But that'll put a bow here on episode 2 of Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. Make sure you're subscribing to us. Thanks for listening.